Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to this evening's talk, The Power of Belonging. Our speaker this evening is Yogesh Sharda, a very experienced student and teacher of Raj Yoga meditation. Yogesh has been a personal development trainer and a workshop facilitator for over 20 years, presenting seminars, workshops, courses to a huge range of organisations all over the world. So I'm very lucky to have him with us here this evening. At the moment, Yogesh is based in Istanbul and he coordinates the activities of Brahman Kumaris in Turkey. Just before I hand over to Yogesh to start the talk, just want to remind you all that the talk is being live streamed on Facebook, so you will be able to watch again later if you wish to on the Inner Space Facebook page. And also just to let you know that Yogesh will take questions at the end of the talk. As you're listening, if questions occur to you, please do put them in the chat addressed to Ruth. I think it's in the chat. You'll see it when you look in the chat. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Yogesh. And thank you for coming along and welcome.
Hello, thank you, Jane, very much. Thank you to Inner Space Manchester. And a great pleasure for me to be with you this evening. It's about 9:30 p.m. here where I am. And so I'm hoping some of the ideas which I'll be sharing tonight will be useful to you in your practical life. And when we think of this topic of belonging, there is a huge amount of very, very good research that's been done by a number of people in different professions to really look at the importance of belonging in human life, why it plays an important part, what happens to a person when they have a sense of belonging, and also what happens to a person when the sense of belonging is missing. So one thing is for sure, that as human beings, we do have social needs. We don't exist as individual beings, but there are needs that need to be met in order for us to, as Maslow has told us, to reach full self-actualization. And also great research has been done in the animal kingdom to see how various forms of animals, whether it's monkeys or even birds, they have a sense of kinship, a sense of belonging to each other. And that's also part of their growth, their social development. For us, of course, as human beings, we have a greater sense of self-determination. And therefore, there is a need for us to understand ourselves and how we can bring ourselves to that full state of self-actualization. Now, I mentioned Maslow already, so I'm going to start off by just showing you his pyramid, which many of you will be familiar with already. And Abraham Maslow he wrote a number of books, 2 books. One was back in 1943. And he talked about the human pyramid of needs. So I think you can just see this here. I won't go into all the details, but just to show you in the context of why belonging is important. And so as you see, he basically outlined these 5 needs. And the pyramid tends to say that each need is becoming more and more, let's say, subtle or refined as we go up the pyramid. And he placed this need for belonging right in the middle as the 3rd main need. So some, of course, would agree with this, and some may have other ideas. But yet important to understand that it has been placed as an important human need. And what I'd like to share with you tonight is some experiences from my own personal journey, my spiritual journey. And I've been in this journey for most of my life since I was around 8 or 9 years old. And so in that sense, there was also a sense of belonging right from my early age. Now, when a person doesn't have a sense of belonging, then they feel very alone as they pass through hardships and challenges, and they feel nobody really cares or have no support. And perhaps we may try and find ways to fit in or to belong to a certain group. And sometimes that may even look a little bit like this, where we try to fit in some way, just to feel as though we belong to a group. So we have a sense of shared identity. But yet, I have found that if we simply try to fit into a group to have a sense of identity without truly understanding ourselves, then the sense of belonging is shallow and also short-lived. And what spirituality tells us is that, first of all, I need to belong to my own self. And that's really the crux of the whole thing. I believe the basis of our experiences in human life are very much connected with my own personal sense of identity. And that's where really belonging begins. Now, I find that every issue in the world, every matter we explore in the world, everything going on in different countries is all connected to identity. Identity is the basis of everything. In some parts of the world, people tend to identify themselves and others by their race, their skin color. And they group people into being of a certain race. In other parts of the world, race isn't as important as religion. And so people are grouped into religious categories, and they even fill in forms to indicate which religious group you belong to. In other parts of the world, the caste that you were born into defines the category that you are in. In other places, social class or sect that you are born into, or the tribe that you belong to, that your forefathers belonged to. And so what are all of these? These are forms of identity. And why this is very important is because as is my sense of identity, so will be my emotional condition. Now, if we wish to deal with and indeed to overcome difficult emotions like loneliness, anxiety, tension, feeling lost, feeling undervalued, feeling overlooked, feeling rejected, there are many techniques to deal with those emotions. But I feel that to truly handle and deal with those emotions, we need to go below the identity layer, below the emotional layer, and really come to understanding our sense of identity. In simple terms, your life is a reflection of how you are choosing to answer the question, who am I? And as we begin to give a better answer to this question, everything in our life begins to improve and to upgrade. So the first thing is this. Let's look at learning to belong, firstly, to my own self. Learning to have a good self-relationship. and why this is important. If we do not establish a good self relationship, then what tends to happen is as we go through life, we use another person as a substitute for me in my own relationship with myself. We tend to feel that there is some kind of gap or something missing in my life, and we put another person into that gap to plug up that sense of something is missing. But of course, the truth is no one can take your place in your relationship with yourself. Let's explore this a little bit more in detail. So I'd like to show a few slides, and some of these ideas, some of you may be familiar with already, as they're basic things we explore in our practice. And so here's the first one. Where is it that I am living from? And why may there be a sense of loneliness or a sense of being disconnected from life or from other people? So there are three layers or three zones within which we can live. And right at the center is what we may call as the true self, the eternal self, I, the being. But we spend very little time in this being zone. What has happened to humanity in general is that we have been pushed out of this inner spiritual zone of being, and we tend to spend our thought energy mostly within the doing realm or within the having realm. And so what this means is as we go through day-to-day life, our thoughts are concerned with the things I need to do and the things that I have. So for example, for the average person, perhaps the majority of their thoughts are concerned with their family, their job, physical health, social perhaps interactions, travel, paying the bills, taking care of the house, so on and so forth. Now, of course, those things have their own importance, but yet, if we are living our life in terms of how we spend our thought energy in the doing realm and in the having realm, what happens is by not paying proper attention to the being realm, which actually is the very core of ourselves, then that inner self becomes rather depleted and weak. Simply because it's not being taken care of, it's not being fed properly with attention. And hence, this creates an inner weakness. It causes our emotions also to go out of our control. So when we are identifying with the things that we do and with the things that we have, that is what then generates this thing which we call as ego. And wherever the ego exists, then of course there will be ego-based emotions. And all of those difficult emotions I mentioned earlier, anxiety and tension, nervousness, loneliness, all of those are products of the ego. So what to do? Well, it's not a question of fighting with the ego, but rather it's a question of understanding why and how it is that we develop this ego in the first place, which then causes us these emotional issues. Now, when a person feels insecure, this is the key word, when there is a feeling of insecurity, then we tend to develop this ego in order to cover up the insecurity that we feel. And as a result of continuing to live within the ego layer, the insecurity is never actually properly looked at. We get busy in simply looking after our ego masks, partly because that's what we see other people doing as well. And as a result, we end up living in a world of ego masks, which is covering up the deep inner need that we have in the spiritual context. So here is another image to help us to understand this. So the world of the ego masks. So as you can see, this inner rectangle here represents these ego-based identities which we create over time. And they're represented as these small I's. So I, for example, even I, the man or woman, I, young person or elderly person, I, the son, daughter, husband, wife, mother, father, or so and so, I from such and such a country, I of such and such a religion, I such and such an organization holding such and such a position, having a certain status, I who went to and was educated at a particular university. And so this drive towards creating an ego-based identity, this is something which I feel has been increasing quite exponentially in the last few decades. And so what happens is we get so lost in this world of ego masks that it's as though the masks begin to get all the power and convinces the spiritual being that I actually am an ego mask. And when we see everybody else doing that too, then it becomes what we call as the norm. But I think as we can see, just even by looking at what's happening in the world today, when life is built upon an ego identity, there is no true peace. There's no real happiness, and there's no sense of stability in our relationships. So why this is important is, first, I need to belong to my own self. I need to see that all of this energy of my consciousness, which has been split up into these ego identities, how can I reclaim that? How can I come back to really being my true inner spiritual self? And this, in a way, is really describing the essence of the whole practice of Raja Yoga meditation. And this image here is showing what happens as we practice spiritual awareness and I come back to belonging to my own self. So underneath all of those ego masks is my true self, my eternal self. And so I've shown that here as the capital I. And what that means is I, the spiritual being, I, the soul. I'm not what I do. I'm not what I have. I'm not who I know, but I am. I'm what? I am peace, I am love, I am joy, I am purity, I am strength. I am a spiritual energy. I am the soul. Again, as many would know, we represent that as this spark of living light in the center of the forehead. So let's do this. Before we go a little bit further, let's just take a moment to reflect on this. I'd like just to share a little commentary with you, just to help us to step back from these ego masks. So if you like, you can just have your feet on the floor if that's comfortable. If you're sitting on a chair, your back straight. Now just speak out a few words just to reflect on. So the world outside is the world of action, the world of noise, the world of movement, the world of doing. There's not much I can do or control about the world outside. But there is also a world inside. That's the world of my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences. And that world is in my own hands. So let me just step back for a moment from the world outside and remind myself I am not my roles and my responsibilities. I am not the labels I carry in daily life. I am not the masks that I wear. Who am I behind the roles, behind the masks, behind the labels? When I look in the mirror, I see the reflection of my face, body. But there is more to me than simply this. I bring my attention up towards my face and to the center of the forehead. I become aware of myself as a living star, a living point of spiritual energy in the center of the forehead. This is me. This is my deepest and truest identity. I am a spiritual energy. I am a soul. Deep inside, I, the soul, there has always been a reservoir of deep peace. Now I emerge this peace once again. All I have to do is just remember I am peace, I am light, I am eternal, I am still, I am free. Just be with this feeling for a moment. Thank you. So when we take a moment to just step back from all that world of ego masks that we tend to live in, it's like, withdrawing the energy which has been trapped in those ego masks, withdrawing it and bringing it back to myself, and just experiencing myself as being whole once again, putting back all those fragmented parts of my consciousness. And when you feel that sense of wholeness, there really is the feeling, I belong to me, first of all. And it changes everything. It's the game changer in our lives. When our consciousness is broken up into all those ego identities, what's happening is because we feel insecure, we are fishing for love and respect from other people. And if we don't get it, we may feel disappointed, anxious, may feel like a loser. Nobody really pays attention to me. And of course, those emotions are very difficult then to handle. And that's what some have called as the outside-in lifestyle, where like a vacuum cleaner, I'm trying to suck respect, attention, love, praise, acceptance towards me from the world outside. And it can be very stressful chasing after a sense of acceptance from other people. And other people can also emotionally play games with you. One moment make you feel like you're the most important person in the world, and next day they can completely ignore you. So that chasing after acceptance or validation or credibility, it's stressful, and also it doesn't really lead to true contentment. But spirituality tells us, rather than this outside-in lifestyle, live the opposite, inside out. And that is, bring yourself together through meditation and self-awareness. Excuse me. Experience a good self-relationship. In meditation, talk to yourself, listen to yourself, understand yourself, become a good friend of the self. And then the result is you radiate kindness and love and friendship towards others. The dynamic in your relationships is very different then. Rather than chasing after appreciation and acknowledgement, I then have the capacity to be able to share that with others. Not giving. I make a distinction between giving love and giving kindness to sharing it. I think rather than being in the give and take dynamic, let us be in the offer and receive dynamic. If, for example, I want to take acceptance or love or kindness from others, but nobody wants to give, then I will suffer. Also, if I want to give kindness and love and acceptance, but nobody wants to take, then again I will suffer. But rather, if I'm so full of these things within me, there'll be a natural offering, a natural sharing of that. And whether others wish to receive or not, it doesn't really bother the self. Because my sharing is then not dependent upon others receiving or not. And a beautiful example of that is the sun. And it's for good reasons that some cultures, some traditions have been worshipping the sun for centuries, because the sun is simply being the sun, as it were, sharing its light, its heat, its energy. And if one day you or I, we draw the curtains and we block out the sun, it doesn't really bother the sun. The next day, the sun will continue to shine. It won't be hurt feeling, yesterday you people blocked me out, so today I'm not going to shine on you. So too, when we are spiritually full, when we are spiritually strong, our capacity to share is natural. This then brings me to the next part, which is how to share and help others feel a sense of belonging. So firstly, rooting myself in spiritual awareness. I am a spiritual being. I am a soul. Peace, love, joy, etc. is my nature. And secondly, we come to next diagram here, which is this one over here. So then, what about when we come into interaction, into communication, relationship with other people? So here on the left, let's say, is one individual. So here is the soul, that spiritual energy. And around this, the soul, are all of these ego masks which have been acquired over life. And they're all connected to our identity, our worldly identity, our physical identity. So as you can see, the nationality, religion, the culture, social status, etc., etc. And there are many, many others which I have not put there. So first thing, of course, as already mentioned, I need to step back and detach from all of these ego masks, and to be aware, I have the ego masks, but I am not defined by them. For example, I have a job, but I am not a job. I have a nationality, but I'm not a nationality. I have a passport, but I'm not a passport. So to be aware of my spiritual identity. And if I'm rooted in my spiritual identity, then when I see another person, my vision, the vision of my third eye, will be able to cut through the ego masks of the other person and see and acknowledge that other person also as a soul. This is a very beautiful and very powerful thing to do. If I'm really in soul conscious awareness, then I can go beyond my own prejudices, my own biases, my own conditioning about the ego masks of other people. So this other soul on the right here also has their own ego masks, which may be different to mine. Maybe another race, maybe nationality, which we are told is an enemy of your nationality, or a different culture, different religion, different race, etc. If my ego masks are talking to your ego masks, then of course there are clashes or there are ups and downs. But if I can see through the ego mask and I see the other human being as a spiritual energy, first and foremost, I see the other as a soul, and this generates a very natural love, acceptance, and respect for the other. Natural, not pretend, not forced, not cosmetic. And that natural sense of love and respect and acceptance will give the other individual a sense of belonging, a sense of connectedness, a sense of relationship. And I, as many others on this call, have had the great fortune of observing some really great spiritual teachers, some great yogis. And I've had the opportunity to observe them and travel with them as well sometimes. And I've seen that because they move around, they live in this soul conscious awareness, whoever they meet, whether it's the person at the check-in desk at the airport, or it's someone in a taxi, or maybe any person doing well in terms of their high flyer in their job, whoever it may be, but they give them a sense of belonging and connectedness because the vision and the attitude is seeing another as a soul. Like we have a soul-to-soul connection with all of us, between each other. And I feel this is really what is missing in the world. And this is our first level of relationship. All other relationships are on the second level. So even if somebody is your brother, your mother, your father, your wife, husband, son, daughter, all of those are the second level of relationship. The first level of relationship has been suppressed. That's the problem in the world today. Our first level of relationship, I am a spiritual being, you are a spiritual being. If we resurrect the first level of relationship, then all the other relationships on the second level, they begin to self-harmonize. Why? Because when the soul-to-soul relationship is resurrected, I have the capacity to understand, to forgive, to value another person. And all of this is important in generating a sense of belonging with another human being. So this is really a lifelong project in developing soul-to-soul communication and being able to rise above prejudices and biases which we may be holding on to due to some past experiences or past conditioning. So then let me move on to just one or two more things to finish off. Also important to understand balance when it comes to belongingness and friendship, a sense of closeness in our relationships, unity, togetherness. And of course, the big word in any language really is the word love, which is an essential human quality and takes on many, many different forms. But yet, it's also a very misunderstood word. So here is a spectrum of what this word represents. At the top of the spectrum is love in its spiritual form. And at the bottom of the spectrum is love in its materialistic form. And so here I've used the word feeling. Love can be a feeling, which is its spiritual form, or love can be an emotion, which is its materialistic form. So largely in the world, what we have today is love in its materialistic form, which can be very very exhilarating, very passionate, very powerful in its initial stages. But then after a while, that love begins to change and turns into these things. And I'll look at this in more detail in a moment. So initially, what seemed to be something which took you into a high state of experience then becomes possession and control, placing pressure upon another person or can be a group of people, making demands, creating dependency, attachment, jealousy, etc. And so when that's the condition, then you can have two people who may be in the same room, but they feel as though they are on different planets. They may have been together for decades, but they feel they do not belong to each other because this condition has been reached where the love has become corrupted. And there's a reason for that. We'll look at that in a moment. But the other end of the spectrum is where the love is pure, the love is clean, the love is spiritual. And characteristics of pure and clean love is there will always be respect for the other. Respect for somebody's individuality, for their unique perspectives, for their style, for their way of thinking, and also all these other things. Understanding of the other, patience to allow somebody to be themselves or to go through their own process, capacity to forgive and not to hold grudges, and to allow somebody to have the space to grow into their own fullness. So what do we have to pay attention to in order for the love to remain clean and pure, and therefore to be able to generate this sense of belonging to others? Now, there's always a healthy space to be had between any two individuals, whether it's family members or it's friends or whoever it may be. And in some parts of the world, people tend to be like this, quite far apart from each other. Where I live, in this geography, people tend to be a bit more like this. Now, this is not so good, but also this is not so good. I believe the right way to be with others is to be like this. Be close, be loving, be supportive, be cooperative, be caring, be sharing. Don't be stuck. So just as we have been told repeatedly over the last 2 years to have some social distancing, so too I think it's important to have spiritual distancing. So we're told if you have social distancing, you won't catch the bug from somebody who may have it, or you may not give it to somebody else. Social distancing is okay, but spiritual distancing is where you don't catch or you're not affected by the negative emotions or expectations or stress of another person, and not pulled into somebody else's emotional games. And so this condition here is where you're close and you're helpful, but you don't come into a dependency. So sometimes when we want maybe to generate a sense of belonging, either for ourselves to others or from others to ourselves, we may take it too far and go out of balance. So here is what we, I think, need to pay attention to in order to not get pulled out of balance. So here is this seesaw, which is telling us these two things need to be balanced. On the one hand, let's be loving. On the other hand, we also need to have a sense of detachment. And these two absolutely go together. If I really want to be loving towards others, I also need to be detached from them. Seems like a paradox, but this is how the balance works. If the love contains detachment, the love remains pure and clean. And as we mentioned earlier, the signs of that love being pure and clean, respect will be there. You honor the individuality of the other. You don't judge them if they're having a bad day or a bad moment. But when we go out of balance, when there is too much emphasis upon the loving side, then this begins to change. And as we saw in the earlier slide, we try to possess an individual, we try to control them, pressure, make demands, develop dependencies, attachments. If they behave with others as we wish them to behave with ourselves, then jealousy comes and so on. If we go too far on being detached from others, then we become a bit cold, indifferent, distant, formal, aloof, uncaring, etc. Rather like a fridge. It's like having a conversation with a fridge, where there's a strange whirring sound and a blast of cold air. So if we're too loving, we need to learn to be more detached. If we're too detached, we need to be a bit more loving. And come to this center point, this balance. And when we're balanced in being detached and loving, then the sense of belonging, which we may offer to another individual, is healthy. And healthy means it will not make that individual dependent upon me or upon some kind of social group I am in, but it will encourage the other person to actually grow, to self-actualize, to open their wings, and to be all that they can be. And I think this should be the aim of why to help others to feel a sense of belonging, or why I myself should feel a sense of belonging. So my own individual wings should open, and I reach the full potential, the full expression of what it means to truly be myself. So I think I'm going to pause there and just check in with Jane to see if there are maybe some comments or questions that may have come in.
Thank you, Yogesh. There's one question. Can I only have a sense of belonging when I know my true self?
I would say a sense of belonging which is truly healthy and is long-lasting happens when I know myself. If I don't know myself, which would mean if I don't have a healthy self-relationship, then I think a sense of belonging would be temporary. And after a while, I may feel I don't belong in that particular setting, then I look for belonging somewhere else. But if I belong to myself, if I have a good self-relationship, wherever I go, I would find it easier to fit in and to belong to the community or the environment in which I find myself. In simple words, the first step really is developing a healthy self-relationship.
And then there's another question, Yogesh, which is about how do we cope with deep feelings of abandonment from childhood?
Yeah, I mean, where there are those situations where from childhood there have been some difficult or sometimes traumatic experiences, then we may need time with somebody who is able to give us time to coach us and guide us out of those difficult experiences. And that means, perhaps someone who's a trained therapist, someone whose job it is to spend a lot of time with you And that's really what what they do is they're paid to spend time with people and help them to grow out of difficult traumatic experiences. If I have a strong family background or I have a community which is loving and has time to offer me that, that's great. But if not, then it may be worth getting some help, at least for some time, from somebody who's able to offer that time and that expertise.
And then another question, what is healthy self-relationship? Is it self-care?
So that's a great question, and it's actually another seminar. What's a healthy self-relationship? Yeah, self-care is certainly part of it. On the one hand, of course, taking care of yourself physically is important, but then also on the internal level, having a healthy self-dialogue, talking to the self, listening to the self every day. So, for example, let's say you make a mistake. Let's say you fail at something. The question is, what is your relationship with failure? And I share my own experience. If I would fail at something, I would feel terrible, especially if I had let somebody else down as part of that failure. I'd feel very heavy, make myself feel guilty, and make sure I suffered for a good while before I gave myself permission to feel better. But then when I observed these very senior meditation teachers, yogis, I noticed that even though they may have forgotten something in terms of communicating something at the right time, but they didn't waste time feeling bad. And I realized that all this feeling heavy is actually an abuse to my own self. And so then I thought, okay, there's three things. One is to ask myself, what did I learn from this situation? Identify the lesson. Firstly, even before that, accept. Okay, in this situation, I forgot, or I didn't do it properly, or I under communicated, for example. Identify what there is to learn from that. What is the lesson I'll carry with me? And then forget the situation. No need to keep thinking about it over and over again. Thirdly, move on. Move on. Carry the lesson with me into tomorrow, but forget the situation. Do not replay that memory again and again. So this is part of healthy self-relationship. Talking to myself positively, constructively. And why it's important is because the mind is like a child. A child knows what he or she wants, but not what he or she needs. And therefore, it's important to have that inner dialogue with the mind. So I keep growing, I keep learning, and I keep myself at peace with my own self.
That links very nicely to the next comment and question as well. So sometimes belonging too much to someone caused us lots of pain. The question is, if I used to be belonging strongly to someone in the past, how can I dissolve this previous old belonging in order to be able to continue a healthy life?
Yeah, I think the key is in the word I. How can I dissolve that? So in the past, that I may have been a certain individual. I was a certain individual with a certain self-image, certain traits, and so on. But when I say I now, then let me really be that true I, the spiritual energy, I, the soul. If I'm really experiencing my first truth as a spiritual being, as that soul energy, then my sense of security and dignity will come from that. And that will enable me to shed those layers of old identity which are connected to those past experiences. So the stronger I become internally, the more easily I'm able to let go of those memories and experiences of the past which may have not been so pleasant for me.
Thank you. That's all the questions. Ruth is going to put in the chat, or she might have done it already, a link to some of your inner freedom guided meditations, Yogesh. So if people are interested in that, they can have a look in the chat and see the link. We're almost at 7:30, so perhaps we could finish with a guided meditation, if that's okay.
That's okay. Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so I ask everyone again to, if it's comfortable for you, have your feet flat on the floor and your back straight. Once again, we start with the question of who am I? I become aware of myself, the being of spiritual light, beyond my physical identity. I realize my thoughts lead to my experiences. And so I choose to be with the thought, I am peace. This treasure of peace has always been inside me. And when I am at peace with myself, my mind becomes very quiet. There is no longer any need to look for recognition or praise or attention from outside of me. There is no need to protect self-image. I am free from the games of the mind. All I have to do is just to dwell in the first truth. That is, I am. I am eternal. I am light. peace. I am still. I am free. So, and thanks to everyone. I hope there's something you can take away and use in your life, in your relationships.
Thank you so much, Yogesh. Thank you for a wonderful, lovely, thought-provoking evening. We're very fortunate to have you share your evening with us. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for coming along. As Yogesh just said, we hope you've found something that you can take away and think about and work on. There should be a slide coming up shortly, the usual inner space stuff. Have a look on the website. We've got the usual lunchtime meditations, got some seminars coming up. What is it? Relax more, stress less. We've got a talk next week, the key to successful relationships. So do please go on the website and have a look. Also have a look in the chat. There's some really good links to some of the meditations that Yogesh has done and some other links too. So thank you. All it remains for me is to wish you all a very peaceful evening and good night.